So as I was learning Objective-C, one of the best features of the language, and the one that I used a lot, was the concept of categories. And this allowed you to extend the functionality of any class, but it's especially useful for the built-in classes which are in the Cocoa framework. So let's say for NSImage that I really wish that NSImage had a certain method that did something or a certain property. We could create a category on NSImage. And then as long as I included that in my project, I can then use it directly on NSImages. So I don't have to subclass NSImage. It really is one of the best features of the language. Well, in Swift, we have that, but they're now known as extensions rather than categories. And I'm going to show you how to create one here. So in Xcode 6, I'm going to create a new iOS application. We'll just create a single view application. I'm going to call it Giants. We're going to use Swift. Everything else you can leave at the defaults. We'll create that. So now I'm going to get a couple of images just to work with. And I'm going to be putting this project up on GitHub as well. So, all right, so I'm going to import these into my project. And now I'm going to go to my main storyboard. So what we're going to create is, obviously, this is a single page application. So I'm going to give the background of my main view controller. We'll just make it black. And the next thing I want to do is when I'm actually looking at this, I want to look at it as a 4-inch iPhone, essentially. So I'm going to go to click on my view controller. For size, I'm going to do iPhone 4-inch. And again, this is just for simulation here. And for the target simulator, I'm going to choose iPhone 5S. And now we're going to drag out that image of Hunter Pence. We're just going to drag it here onto the view controller. And let me set that up now. So it's going to have a width and a height, both of 190, like that. Let me drag this to the center. And for the mode, I'm going to say aspect fit, like that. And now let me just set up some constraints. So I'm going to set the constraint to the top. I'm going to center it horizontally in the container. And I'm going to come down here. And well, this is kind of off the screen, but I'm setting the width and the height to be constant. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to add is just a simple label. So let me go here, pull out this label. And I'm just going to put his name in there, Hunter Pence. And we're going to choose a custom font. I'm just going to use Helvetica Neue, and we're going to go with thin. And I'm going to make it a size of 33. And we will also center it like that, and just put it underneath the photo. And let me set up constraints for this. I'm going to drag to that image. I'm going to say we're going to go to the top, and we're going to center the X. Okay, so now we have the basic scene set up. And let's just go ahead and run it to make sure things look okay. So here it is, and here we have our application. Okay, so what we're going to be creating is essentially an effect that you see a lot now on iOS, and that is a picture of somebody's face. It's actually a circle. So I essentially want to take this square image and turn it into a circle with a border around it. So we're going to create an extension to UI image, which is going to do that work for us. So essentially, we're going to be adding a new method to the UI image class. So let me first go to the assistant editor here, and we get some space. And we're going to need a reference to that image view. So I'm just going to control drag, and we'll just call it image view. And let me close that. Now if we go back to our view controller, I now have a reference to that image view, which is in my storyboard. Okay, so in the view did load, essentially what we're going to do is we're going to take that image, which is in the image view, which is a square image, and call a method on UI image called crop to circle with border color. So, and this is what our extension is going to be. So now in previous versions of Xcode with Objective-C, there was actually a template for creating a category. We don't have that here yet. So I'm just going to create a new file, and I'm just going to create an empty Swift file. Click Next. Now for the name, the general convention in Objective-C was to use the class name that you want to extend, a plus sign, and then a general term of what methods are in here. So for instance, for UI image, this extension that crops to a circle could be part of maybe 5 different cropping methods that I have. So I'm going to call it UI image plus cropping, like that. And here we have our new Swift file. So obviously the first thing we want to do is to import UIKit, not foundation. And now to create an extension, it's very easy. All you have to do is to use the extension keyword. So extension, and then we give the class we want to extend, which is obviously UI image. And now inside of here, we can do things like, for instance, let's say we wanted to create a static method on UI image. Well, we could just say static func, and then we would use it, we would create a method on the class itself. But we're going to create this as an instance method. So all I need to do is to create a function. So I'm going to say func, and then we're calling it crop to circle with border color. Now to this, we're going to send 2 parameters. First is going to be a color parameter, and this is going to be of type UI color. And the second is going to be the line width, or how thick I want the stroke to be. So I'm going to call it line width, and this is going to be a CG float. So again, we're going to be calling this on an actual UI image instance. So what we want to return is a new UI image, and that's going to contain our, cropped circle with the border. So here's my function declaration. And just so we can get rid of these errors just while we're doing it, I'm just going to say return UI image, just so it doesn't bother us. So when we want to actually get at the pixels of an image and do things like drawing on top of it or cropping it, we need to get a graphics context. And more in particular, we need the image context. So the first thing I'm going to do is to create a constant, which is called ImageRect. Because we're going to need in a couple of different places to know what is the rect of this current image instance. So I'm going to set that equal to CGRect, and we're going to use the origin and size initializer. And for the origin, it's going to be CG.0, which is essentially just a 0, 0 location, and then self.size. So what we now need to do is to begin our image context. And this context, once we begin it, is going to allow us to draw into it. So to do that, we're going to use the UI graphics begin image context. And for the size, we're just going to use ImageRect.size because we want the new image to be the same size as the original image that we're drawing from. So what we now need is a reference to the current graphics context. because we're going to need that when we do our core graphics calls. So I'm going to create a var here just called context, and then I'm going to go to UI graphics, and it is get current context. Okay, so now that we have that, now we can actually do the work of creating our circle, which is going to act as a mask, or it's going to clip this image. So what I want to do is to actually use the CG context add ellipse in rect. And this is essentially going to add a circle in whatever rect I define, but we just want to use that image rect, CG rect object. So now that I have that, what I want to do is to use it to clip this drawing context. So anything I draw outside of this circle is going to be clipped off. And for that, we say CG context clip. And again, we're always having to pass in that constant context instance. So now that I have my ellipse there and it's being used as a clipping mask, now I want to actually draw the image that this instance represents, which is that image of Hunter Pence. So to do that, all I have to say is self draw at point. And again, I'm just going to use CG point 0. And this is going to draw the current image attached to this instance at the 0, 0 position. Okay, now that we have our image drawn, we're going to create another rect. So we're going to say CG context add ellipse in rect. And this one is going to allow us to stroke that circle. So again, pass in image rect. And now we need to set up the style of our stroke. Well, we passed in those two parameters to this function called color and line width. So let's start with the color. We're going to say color.setStroke. And to set the line width, we're going to use CG context set line width and pass in that line width parameter. And finally, to actually make the stroke appear, we're going to say CG context stroke path context. Okay, so remember that this instance method returns a new instance of UI image. So we need to create that now. So I'm going to create it as a let. So we're just going to say let new image is equal to UI graphics get image from current image context. Probably the longest method name I've ever seen. But what it does is takes any drawing or anything that's been put into this drawing context, it's going to create an image out of it for us, which is exactly what we want. And remember, when you're working with core graphics, you need to be careful with memory. So we want to release this context before we leave. And now I want to return that new image that I just created. So there is our finished extension method. And again, now that I've created this, anywhere in my project, I can say on any UI image, say crop the circle with border color. So let's now go back to our view controller and implement it into our application. So what I'm going to first do is to get a reference of the image which is inside of that image view. So I'm going to say let img is equal to image view dot image. And now that we have that instance, so what I'm now going to do is to set a new image on our image view. So I'm going to say image view dot image is equal to img dot crop to circle with border color. And now I need to pass in those two parameters. Now for the color, I want to get this San Francisco Giants orange. I'm going to open a tool that Tom Kircher and I are currently working on, which is kind of an advanced color selection tool. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to paste that in. You can see it pasted in as a UI color. And for a line width, I'm going to set it to 20, like that. So let's go ahead and run this now. And let me bring up the simulator. And there we have our finished effect. So we started with that square image and created an image extension on UI image, which takes the image, crops it into a circle, and gives it a stroke around the edges. So this concept of creating extensions is very powerful. And if you go on GitHub, you will find what used to be called categories and now called extensions for every imaginable thing that you might want to do. So definitely, before you go ahead and write a whole bunch of stuff yourself, definitely check on GitHub. But this is an amazingly useful way so that you don't have to subclass UI image in order to add functionality.